Hello everyone, welcome to the Literary and Jury Charge for the 225 class. Today we're going to start off with an excerpt from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and this is called Experiment with Your Back Burner. Okay, and I will read this at 200. Ready? Your back burner is an excellent tool for remembering a fact or bringing forth an insight. It's an almost effortless yet effective way of using your mind when you might otherwise start feeling stressed out. Using your back burner means allowing your mind to solve a problem while you are busy doing something else here in the present moment. The back burner of your mind works in the same way as the back burner of a stove. While on low heat, the cooking process mixes, blends, and simmers the ingredients into a tasty meal. The way you prepared this meal was to throw the various ingredients into the pot, mix them up, and leave them alone. Often the less you interfere, the better the result. In much the same way, we can solve many of life's problems, serious or otherwise, if we feed the back burner of our mind with a list of problems, facts and variables, and possible solutions. Just as when we make up soup or a sauce, the thoughts and ideas we feed the back burner of our mind must be left alone to simmer properly. Whether you are struggling to solve a problem or can't remember a person's name, your back burner is always available to help you. It puts our quieter, softer, and sometimes most intelligent source of thinking to work for us on issues that we have no immediate answer for. The back burner is not a prescription for denial or procrastination. In other words, while you do want to put your problems on your back burner, you don't want to turn the burner off. Instead, you want to gently hold the problem in your mind without actively analyzing it. This simple technique will help you solve many problems and will greatly reduce the stress and effort in your life. Okay. I've got some testimony here. This is from an actual transcript. This happened in Texas. Okay. Again, this is actual testimony, straight matter. Here we go. Ready? I will read this at 200. I remember that night, I think November 4, 2012, and David showed up at my doorstep. He had just come back from Lubbock, and he had this look in his eyes that was horrible. He looked so scared. He had this red stuffed animal dog in his hands. I could tell something was wrong, but I figured he was just tired. So he wanted to stay and spend the night. A month later, I was coming into my house with him, and I was questioning him about past relationships because he was always telling me that I was his first real girlfriend. I thought that was kind of strange because most people have some kind of relationship of one kind or another. I remember he read off a list of names of girls he had known or gone places with that were kind of significant. I will never forget him mentioning the name Adrian because that name kind of stuck in my head. I guess I was asking a lot of questions. For some reason, I felt like I needed to ask about Adrian. He held back a lot, and we just went inside my house. We just decided to walk inside of the house because we had been sitting inside the car. When we got inside, we got into a big fight because, as always, he was trying to make me study for the SAT test, and I didn't want to. We fought for a while, and at the end we stopped fighting and had calmed down. And he just looked at me and said, I have something really important to tell you, and it is really important. I kind of knew what he was going to tell me just by the way he looked at me. He told me, you haven't been the only girl in my life. He said, I have had sex with someone else before. I just looked at him in shock, and I asked, did he mean he wasn't a virgin when he met me? And he said he was. I think that made me feel even worse because that meant that he lost his virginity to me, but that he had been with someone else since then. All I could do was question him and scream and blame myself for everything. I remember reaching out for this big brass thing that my mom had, this brass rod, and aiming for him and trying to hit him because I was so upset. He took it away from me and tried to calm me down because I was screaming so hysterically. He was trying to protect himself from getting hurt, but he was also trying to protect me from hurting myself because I kept ramming my head against the walls, and when I was on the ground, I kept ramming my head into the floor, trying to crack my skull. I didn't want to live with what he had just said to me. I felt like I had lost everything. My head wasn't working the way it should, and my family wasn't in the best financial state. And now he was telling me the one thing I prized more than anything else, and it was taken away. I don't think I was even thinking. In fact, I know I wasn't thinking. I screamed at him, "Kill her, kill her." He was so scared that he wasn't about to say no to me. I was still banging my head against the floor. All David wanted to do was make everything better. It seemed like him agreeing to do that was the only thing that would calm me down. David promised that he would do that, and he never has broken a promise to me before. On December 2, 2012, we spent basically the weekend trying to get a hold of Adrian, and I think we were both acting out in passion. I think we expected to get caught really fast because we didn't spend much time thinking about what we were doing. The only time David planned anything was when he sat me down at his house for about 5 minutes to calm me down and throw stuff in a bag. The plan was for David to break her neck and sink the body to the bottom of the lake. About 12:30 a.m. on December 4, 2012, we were at his house. David had said he would meet Adrian at about 12:30 a.m., so we were running late. We were driving my green Mazda Protege. It seemed like David put together what he was going to do really quick because he really didn't have much time to think. The day prior, he had spent more time calming me down than thinking about what he was going to do. I would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. I couldn't even look at his face because I thought he was a different person, and it made me sick. I had horrible pictures running through my head about what happened between him and Adrian, and they made me feel really sick. We met her at about 1:35 a.m. on December 4, 2012, at her house. David had called her at about 10:30 p.m. on December 3rd, 2012, and it was planned for her to come out. She thought she was coming out so they could have sex again. She came out to the car and got in. I was hiding in the trunk and David was driving. I remember being really scared because at a time like that, when you kind of know what's happening, you really don't trust anyone. I remember wanting to turn back. I was afraid to move, so I just laid still in the trunk. David later told me that he felt the same way, that he wanted to turn back and take her home, but he was afraid of what I would do or say if he turned back. David usually always had a gun of some sort with him. And that is all the testimony I have of that straight matter. Okay, I'm going to read from Awaken the Giant Within. Just about a page or so. Here we go. Let's see. Okay, here we go. We will either find a way or make one. One of the most important decisions you can make to ensure your long-term happiness is to decide to use whatever life gives you in the moment. The truth of the matter is that there's nothing you can't accomplish if, number one, you clearly decide what it is that you're absolutely committing to achieving. Number 2, you are willing to take massive action. Number 3, you notice what's working or not. And number 4, you continue to change your approach until you achieve what you want, using whatever life gives you along the way. Anyone who's succeeded on a large scale has taken these 4 steps and followed the ultimate success formula. One of my favorite ultimate success stories is from Mr. Soichiro Honda, founder of the corporation that bears his name. Like all companies, no matter how large, Honda Corporation began with a decision and a passionate desire to produce a result. In 1938, while he was still in school, Mr. Honda took everything he owned and invested it in a little workshop where he began to develop his concept of a piston ring. He wanted to sell his work to Toyota Corporation, so he labored day and night up to his elbows in grease, sleeping in the machine shop, always believing he could produce the result. He even pawned his wife's jewelry to stay in business. But when he finally completed the piston rings and presented them to Toyota, he was told they didn't meet Toyota's standards. He was sent back to school for 2 years, where he heard the derisive laughter of his instructors and fellow students as they talked about how absurd his designs were. But rather than focusing on the pain of the experience, he decided to continue to focus on his goal. Finally, after 2 more years, Toyota gave Mr. Honda the contract he dreamed of. His passion and belief paid off because he had known what he wanted, taken action, noticed what was working, and kept changing his approach until he got what he wanted. Then a new problem arose. The Japanese government was gearing up for war, and they refused to give him the concrete that was necessary to build his factory. Did he quit there? No. Did he focus on how unfair this was? Did it mean to him that his dream had died? Absolutely not. Again, he decided to utilize the experience and developed another strategy. He and his team invented a process for creating their own concrete and then built their factory. During the war, it was bombed twice, destroying major portions of the manufacturing company. Honda's response? He immediately rallied his team, and they picked up the extra gasoline cans that the U.S. fighters had discarded. He called them gifts from President Truman because they provided him with the raw materials he needed for his manufacturing process, materials that were unavailable at the time in Japan. Finally, after surviving all of this, an earthquake leveled his factory. Honda decided to sell his piston operation to Toyota. Here is a man who clearly made strong decisions to succeed. He had a passion for and belief in what he was doing. He had a great strategy. He took massive action. He kept changing his approach, but still he'd not produced the results that he was committed to. Yet he decided to persevere. After the war, a tremendous gasoline shortage hit Japan, and Mr. Honda couldn't even drive his car to get food for his family. Finally, in desperation, he attached a small motor to his bicycle. The next thing he knew, his neighbors were asking if he could make one of his motorized bikes for them. One after another, they jumped on the bandwagon until he ran out of motors. He decided to build a plant that would manufacture motors for his new invention. But unfortunately, he didn't have the capital. As before, he made the decision to find a way no matter what. His solution was to appeal to the 18,000 bicycle shop owners in Japan by writing them each a personal letter. He told them how they could play a role in revitalizing Japan through the mobility that his invention could provide, and convinced 5,000 of them to advance the capital he needed. Still, his motorbike sold to only the most hardcore bicycle fans because it was too big and bulky. So he made one final adjustment and created a much lighter, scaled-down version of his motorbike. He christened it the Super Club. the Super Cub, and it became an overnight success, earning him the Emperor's Award. Later, he began to export his motorbikes to the baby boomers of Europe and the United States, following up in the 70s with the cars that have become so popular today. Today, the Honda Corporation employs over 100,000 people in both the United States and Japan, and is considered one of the biggest car-making empires in Japan, outselling all but Toyota in the United States. It succeeds because one man understood the power of a truly committed decision that is acted upon, no matter what the conditions, on a continuous basis. Okay, we'll stop there. Got some jury charge for you. And the subject is unlawful seizure. Okay, I will read this at 200. Ready? Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, one of the inalienable rights of the individual citizen is the immunity from the unlawful seizure and detention of his person by any agency of the state. You are instructed that the general rule of the law is that no person shall be deprived of his liberty except he first be charged by affidavit or indictment with the commission of an offense, such charge being followed by a warrant duly issued and placed in the hands of an officer authorized to serve such process. To this general rule there are certain exceptions made necessary by the needs of society. Among the exceptions is that an officer may arrest a person without a warrant for an offense committed within his view or upon information when he has reasonable or probable cause to believe that such person has committed a felony. When a police officer arrests a person without a warrant upon information, when he has reasonable or probable cause to believe that such person has committed a felony, it is the duty of the officer to take the person whom he has placed under arrest before some court of proper jurisdiction, as soon as he can reasonably do so, to be charged with such offense by affidavit, or to be given an opportunity to be released on bond. If the officer fails to take the person so arrested before a court of proper jurisdiction as required by law, or gives him no opportunity to be released on bond, then he is liable to such person in an action for damages. You are instructed that the power of detaining a person arrested without a warrant upon information or restraining him of his liberty, even when there is reasonable or probable cause to believe that such person has committed a felony, is not a matter within the discretion of the officer making the arrest. He cannot legally hold the person arrested in custody for a longer period of time than is reasonably necessary under all these circumstances without a warrant. Mere loss of freedom cannot constitute imprisonment, even though it was unjust. The imprisonment must be unlawful. One may be acquitted upon the merits of the case, or discharged upon some question of law, but that fact does not in and of itself make the restraint placed upon his liberty false imprisonment. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you find for the plaintiff, you are instructed that wounded pride, humiliation, and mortification resulting from the police arrest and the public trial are elements to be taken into consideration in assessing damages in cases of this character. You are further instructed that in case of false imprisonment and malicious prosecution, the jury may inflict exemplary damages when the facts so justify. Such damages do not necessarily depend upon malice on the part of the wrongdoer, but they may be rightfully awarded when the wrongful act is willfully done in a wanton or oppressive manner, or done in the reckless disregard of the rights of the complaining property. Okay, we got about a minute left. I'm going to read a little bit more from the Jerry Brudos case here, the fatal shoe fetish. Okay, here we go. He was talented in mathematics and science, but he performed below his abilities. Years later, when Brudos became infamous, nobody from high school could remember him. It was as if he did not exist. Like so many serial killers, he lived in isolation. After 8 months of treatment, Brudos was released from hospital care and moved back to his unhappy home. Brudos graduated from high school in 1958 and was said to have excelled in electronics. In March 1959, Brudos joined the Army and was trained as a communications technician, but he received an early discharge in October 1959 after being found unfit for service. Brudos moved back in with his parents in their 2-bedroom house in Corvallis, Oregon. While his brother Larry was away at college, Brudos was allowed to sleep in the 2nd bedroom, but when Larry came home, he was relegated to a shed at the back of the house. During this period of time, Jerry began to stalk and attack women whose shoes he was attracted to. He would choke them into unconsciousness and then run off with their shoes. He continued stealing women's garments from clotheslines and dwelled in his dark shed surrounded by female attire. Despite Jerry's mental problems, he continued to excel in electronics. He became a licensed broadcast technician and was employed at a Corvallis radio station as their engineer. He was less of a loner than in high school and was friendly with several male employees at the station. He remained, however, terminally shy in the presence of women. There was a young boy who used to come to the radio station and hang around, watching Jerry work and pestering him with questions. One day in 1962, Brudos jokingly told him to find him a girlfriend. To Jerry's surprise, the boy took him to a house where he introduced him to a pretty dark-haired 17-year-old girl with big eyes. Her name was Susan, and she was almost as shy as Jerry. Despite her shyness, Susan had dated teenage boys her own age, but the 23-year-old Brudos seemed different to her. He courted her, pulling out her chair, buying her gifts, and opening doors for her, and treated her as a lady. She was impressed by his job at the radio station and the attention and admiration he gave her. They had sex, and according to Susan, said there never seemed anything strange about Jerry. He was sweet and loving. She knew nothing of his fetishes or his past mental problems. Before long, Susan was pregnant and they decided to get married. The couple had already agreed that they would marry if she became pregnant. Brudos admitted that their relationship was not a big love affair, that Susan saw marriage as a way of escaping the restrictions of her strict parents, while he needed a companion. In 1962, the couple had a girl whom they named Karen. Okay, that concludes our literary and jury charge for the 225 class. Have a great day.